Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing another movie review, so hopefully you find this one interesting. This movie is a crime thriller from Denmark, Danish language English subs, released in the year 2017, directed by Funna Ahmad, and this film is called Darkland. So Darkland is set in Copenhagen. You've got a very successful surgeon named Zaid. Zaid has recently delivered a life-saving transplant that is cause for celebration. So this particular evening, he's got his pregnant wife beside him, he's invited a few friends and they're having dinner. So during the dinner there's a knock on the door and it's Yasin, who is Zaid's younger brother. Yasin is desperate, he's panicking, he says that he owes a lot of money to some very dangerous people, but Zaid sees this as just a cash grab. He's done this before, and so he says, look, Yasin, go away, I'm not giving you any money. So the next day, Yasin ends up being found dead. He's been murdered by the people that he says he owed money to, so Zaid is torn up by this. He believes that he should have looked over his little brother a lot more, and so in order to try and get some justice for Zaid, he has to deliver it himself because the police don't have any leads. So he goes down a very dark passage of vengeance that he passes a point of no return that threatens to destroy the life that he's worked so hard for. So whether or not it does is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Darkland. If you are a fan of Nicolas Winding Refn's Pusher, where it was set in the underbelly of Copenhagen and showing you despicable people, a very raw and gritty experience, and if you're also a fan of Harry Brown, which is a UK revenge thriller starring Michael Caine, chances are you're going to really like Darkland because it has a lot of similarities with those movies. Now, the similarities with The Pusher is that it has a very raw and gritty aspect in this movie, is that the violence is very in your face, it's not gratuitous violence, it's not therapeutic violence, and it feels as though you're in a world that you don't want to be a part of. Despicable people, but at the same time these are people who are victim of their circumstances, victim of their upbringing, and this is a lot of comparisons that I can make with Harry Brown. In Harry Brown, it was about the youth and how out of control the youth are, and so although they're doing horrible things, I still felt as though they are learning the ways of the world, but they've been brought up in an environment that's shaping these people into very dangerous people. And so it's very different from, say, 50 years ago, and I thought that was a commentary of the youth and how out of control the youth are. And I thought Darkland was very similar, is that the villains in this movie are very young. They've still got a lot of learning to do, but the environment is shaping them as the people that they are. So this is not a movie like The Punisher. It's not a movie like I Spin You a Grave, where you've got villains that deserve what's coming to them. And so it feels very therapeutic. It feels very satisfying when the bad guys get really horrible things, you know, like such as limbs being cut off and all that sort of stuff. And so the therapeutic violence, it does go into a realm of caricature nature. Whereas in this movie, it's very realistic. It shares a lot of similarities with Harry Brown, where the violence has been thrust upon people that you don't necessarily feel as though it's a very satisfying experience. You don't feel, okay, well, there's no real closure to this, and it shows you the endless cycle of violence and how destructive violence can be. And it's a sense of tragedy that the movie has, is because Zaid has everything going for him, but he's consumed by hatred. Is that the violence and the quest for vengeance is shaping him as a person that is being completely different to what he was to start with. But at the same time, he's never losing the values that he had. He's never losing the compassion that made him a likable person in the first place. So you can never disconnect yourself. I never felt like this is a guy that was bulletproof. I never felt like it was an I Spin You a Grave film where it was a sweet innocent lady turned into this killing machine that was to be feared. I always felt as though Zaid kept his level of realism to a point where I could really relate to him, and although he was doing horrible things, I still felt as though he had that compassion, and he had a sense that he was losing grip on his control of his life, and that he had everything going for him, but the violence, and the deeper he goes into the violence, the more sad and the more tragic the whole film feels. And so because there's no sense of satisfaction, there's no safety net in this movie, and that safety net is something that you get in a lot of revenge thrillers, because you can say to yourself, alright, I'm enjoying the violence because they deserve what they get. But in this movie, you're not enjoying it as much because these youth that are actually having this violence inflicted upon them are ignorant. They are very young, but as I said, it's the environment that they're being put up in that's shaping them as people. So the true villain in this movie is the sense of vengeance, it's the sense of violence, and it's the sense of the gritty sort of underbelly that the movie depicts itself in. And so I thought that was really intriguing, and that's what keeps you glued to the screen. You've also got a very strong sense of style that is very reminiscent of Nicolas Winding Refn's later films, and you've got the very strong camera angles, you've got very strong a very strong soundtrack that I thought really contributed to the hypnotic approach that the movie has. And so straight away, because of the camera angles, because of the soundtrack, you're glued to the screen. You want to see what happens to Zaid. You want to see what happens to his brother. You want to see this quest for vengeance that is getting worse and worse, and you feel as though it's a hopeless situation, that is basically a lose-lose, and everyone is going to come out of this ordeal basically not the same, and that it was going to be a sense of tragedy. And then right at the end of the film, there is one scene that shows I'm not going to tell you what it does, but it actually sums up what the whole film was about. It's just a strong level of emptiness, and that emptiness is because of the violence. Is that, you know, killing someone doesn't necessarily mean that your problems are going to be solved. And so it's basically the case of violence and how destructive violence can be, and doing it with a lot of respect and keeping that relatability in this character that makes it even more fearful. So you've got an absolutely fantastic performance from Dar Salim, who plays Zaid. Dar Salim has been in quite a lot of films, but he does a great job at portraying this very, very likable person. But then as he starts to progress from this surgeon to this actor of vengeance, I never felt like he was a different person to what made Salim the relatable person that he was at the start of the movie. So he keeps his level of relatability, he keeps his personality, and when he's doing horrible things, I never felt like he was getting anything out of it, and that he sensed that he was basically on a downward spiral, and that everything that he has, you know, a pregnant wife, a very good job, everything that was put on the line was compensated with this very empty sort of style of violence that he was creating. So I thought that was very heartbreaking, very, very sad, and at the same time very, very brutal. The violence in this film was very in your face. It's very hard to watch, but it's very few and far between, so it's not gratuitous. And I thought the violence was very pivotal in the film because it helps shape the overall message that violence will get you nowhere, violence will just make things worse, and so that's exactly what it does. So the acting from the supporting cast was decent, but I do have a problem with the supporting cast, and that's the only real criticism I have of the film, is that I felt as though some of the relationships outside of the main character could have been developed a little bit more. So case in point, the pregnant wife, I knew that they were in love because there were some scenes where they're kissing each other, but I never felt like the chemistry was completely there. And I thought that his relationship with Yasin is very soon before he's been murdered, and so you don't really get a grip of how they were before he was killed. You didn't know how they were when he was actually alive, and so the connection there before his death, I thought it would have been a little bit better if it actually gave you some insight into that. Maybe if they were very close, you knew that Zaid was torn up by this because his brother died, but how was that relationship before he died? And I thought a little bit more into that could have made the film a little bit more impactful than it was. But yeah, and some other relationships, as I said, with the supporting cast could have been delved in a little bit more to make it a little bit more fleshy. But apart from that, it's still a very, very impressive film. It's one that I'm highly recommending if you are a fan of revenge thrillers. It's definitely a movie that strikes you with a lot of realism and a lot of tragedy as well. So overall, I'm going to give Darkland 4 stars. Go out there and see it. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.